Dentists say that drinking it can protect your teeth against cavities. Cities and towns all across the world actually dump it into the water supply, hoping to indiscriminately medicate the population through their tap water faucets. The official story on fluoride sounds wonderful. Drink the stuff and you won't get cavities, we're told. It's a nice story. But there's another side to this story, a side you're never told. And it starts with the astonishing but verifiable fact that nearly all the fluoride dripped into municipal water supplies isn't naturally occurring fluoride at all. In fact, it's actually a combination of hexafluorosilicic acid and sodium silicofluoride. These two chemicals are considered highly toxic by the EPA. They're actually classified as hazardous waste, and when packaged for transportation, they must be labeled as poison and handled by workers wearing industrial safety gear. So, what are hexafluorosilicic acid and sodium silicofluoride, and where do they come from? That's the part of this story that you probably won't believe. That is, not until you check it out for yourself. Because the more you look into the mythology of fluoride, the more bizarre this story becomes. And this bizarre story begins at phosphate mining companies. Phosphate is an important mineral used in fertilizers. It's mined from natural rock deposits scattered across the world, and the phosphate rock is then refined to produce phosphoric acid. If that name sounds familiar, that's because it's one of the main ingredients in carbonated sodas, such as Coke and Pepsi. Phosphoric acid is often compared to battery acid. It's a highly acidic liquid that is believed to be the primary reason why drinking sodas can result in kidney stones and a loss of bone mineral density. Phosphate rock is also used to create fertilizers. The problem is phosphate is often contaminated with high levels of fluoride, as much as 40,000 parts per million, or up to 4% of the raw ore. To remove the fluoride, sulfuric acid is added to a wet slurry of phosphate and water. This causes the fluoride to vaporize, creating highly toxic gaseous compounds such as hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride. These toxic fluoride chemicals used to be released directly from the smokestacks of phosphate mining operations, but the nearby farms suffered devastating losses of cattle and food crops, which withered away and died due to, guess what? Fluoride poisoning. In order to stop this environmental destruction, the phosphate mining industry put in place a way to capture the toxic fluoride chemical vapors so that they wouldn't be released into the air and kill the surrounding livestock and vegetation. This was accomplished by installing wet scrubbers that captured the toxic fluoride chemicals, preventing them from being released into the environment and killing the plant and animal life living nearby. It is from these wet scrubbers that toxic fluoride chemicals are now harvested. They're collected, repackaged, shipped to your local city, and then dumped into the municipal water supply. So instead of these toxic fluoride chemicals being released by the phosphate mining smokestacks, they are instead captured and then released into the water supply of large cities, where the chemicals then contaminate the water of millions of people at a time. This is called water fluoridation. When dentists and doctors say they support fluoride in the water supply, what they're really saying is that they support the mass poisoning of the population with a highly toxic hazardous waste product that, if it weren't dripped into the water supply, it would have to be disposed of as a highly toxic hazardous waste under strict EPA regulations. Curiously, it is a violation of federal law to dump hexafluorosilicic acid or sodium silicofluoride into the water. Such an act, in fact, is considered an act of terrorism. Yet it is mysteriously allowed today as long as it is accompanied by a loosely justified claim that we're doing this to stop cavities. But setting aside for the moment the inconvenient truth that water fluoridation involves the illegal act of dumping hazardous waste into the water supply, there's another important question in all this. Do these toxic fluoride chemicals actually prevent cavities? Roughly 99% of the municipal water pumped through any given city never ends up in the mouths of the people. Most water is used for showering, washing dishes, washing clothes, watering yards, and filling pools. Almost none of the fluoride dripped into the water supply comes into contact with human teeth. It does, however, end up downstream, where it contaminates rivers, streams, and ultimately the oceans of our world. In this way, water fluoridation policies have become a convenient loophole through which the phosphate mining industry can dump its toxic waste byproducts into the environment without adhering to any EPA regulations whatsoever. Phosphate mining companies even turn a profit by selling their hazardous waste to cities, then labeling it fluoride, even though this name is scientifically inaccurate. All this raises an obvious question. If fluoride kills cows and crops and fish and is considered a hazardous waste chemical by the EPA, then how could it be healthy to ingest? And why don't doctors and dentists, even though they openly recommend fluoride, sometimes with irrational exuberance, know where fluoride really comes from? If dentists knew fluoride was derived from the chemical waste of the phosphate mining industry, would they still recommend that we consume it? The truth about fluoride is a lot like the truth about Enron or Goldman Sachs or every other shocking revelation that nobody believed until it suddenly became obvious that we were all being fooled for so long. Fluoride is a clever scheme where a hazardous waste chemical is dumped into the environment by passing it through the bodies of people first. We, the people, have become the toxic waste dump site of the phosphate mining industry, and chances are your local dentist fully supports this entire process. Over the last several decades, an astonishing 24 studies have established a statistical link between fluoride exposure and low IQs in children. One study conducted by the Center for Endemic Disease Control in China found that each additional milligram of fluoride detected in every liter of a child's urine was associated with a 0.59-point decrease in their IQ score. Another study found that fluoride exposure slashed the number of children achieving high IQs by more than 70%. It shouldn't be surprising, of course, to learn that consuming a hazardous chemical might impair brain function. Water fluoridation, it turns out, may be the root cause of the alarming drop in academic aptitude among children in first world nations. Historically speaking, the mathematics that were taught to 8th graders in the 1950s are now college-level courses in 2011. Maybe the reason why Johnny can't read or spell is because Johnny's been drinking too much fluoride. So I have 3 bits of advice for you. First, for your dental needs, always seek out a holistic dentist who understands the toxicity of fluoride and mercury. They will advise you not to drink toxic fluoride chemicals from your tap water. Secondly, don't drink unfiltered tap water. In addition to the toxic fluoride chemicals, tap water is also usually contaminated with chlorine and even dangerous elements from old water pipes. Buy a good countertop water filter from a company like Aquasana, or get a whole house filter to remove chlorine and fluoride from the water entering your home. Thirdly, help fight water fluoridation in your local city or town. If your city is like most cities, water fluoridation policies have been pushed by dentists and doctors who are technically ignorant of the origins and composition of fluoride, and yet they seek to assert power over the composition of your local water supply. They essentially attempt to mass medicate the entire population with what can only be called a drug, a biologically active chemical that they claim can prevent a health condition. And yet, has this drug called fluoride ever received FDA approval as a drug? Have the individual members of the population been individually assessed for their need for such a drug? Have medication doses and drug interactions been considered? Has anyone even been written a prescription for this drug? The answer is no. Fluoride is an unapproved drug being used in a highly illegal mass medication scheme that provides an excuse for the real agenda of disposing of a highly toxic, hazardous waste chemical. It's time to stop fluoride. Demand an end to fluoridation in your local cities and towns. Call for those who purchase and handle fluoride to stop what they're doing. Question the safety of these toxic chemicals being dripped into the water supply. These are actions that endanger the public. They could be called acts of terrorism. And publicly shame the doctors and dentists who have taken part in this mass chemical poisoning, causing untold harm to populations all over the world. Help us stop the fluoride poisoning of our world. Learn more at naturalnews.com. Join the Facebook group No Fluoride. See more videos about fluoride at naturalnews.tv.
10 basic facts about fluoride. Fact number 1. Most developed countries do not fluoridate their water. In the United States, health authorities call fluoridation one of the top 10 public health achievements of the 20th century. Few other countries, however, share this view. In fact, there are now more people drinking fluoridated water in the United States alone than the rest of the world combined. This is because most advanced nations do not fluoridate their water. In Western Europe, for example, 97% of the population has water without a single drop of fluoride added to it. Fact number 2, fluoridated countries do not have less tooth decay than non-fluoridated countries. It is often claimed that fluoridated water is the main reason the United States has seen a significant decline in tooth decay over the past 60 years. However, this same decline in tooth decay has occurred in all developed countries, most of which have never added any fluoride to their water. Today, according to data from the World Health Organization, there is no discernible difference in tooth decay between the minority of developed countries that fluoridate their water and the majority that do not. Fact number 3, fluoride affects many tissues in the body besides the teeth. Advocates of fluoridation have long claimed that the safety of fluoridation is beyond scientific debate. However, according to the well-known toxicologist, Dr. John Duell, who chaired the National Academy of Sciences review on fluoride, the safety of fluoridation remains poorly studied and largely unknown. In 2006, Duell's committee at the NAS published a comprehensive 500-page review of fluoride's toxicity. The report concludes that fluoride is an endocrine disruptor and can affect many things in the body, including the bones, the brain, the thyroid gland, the pineal gland, and even blood sugar levels. So far from giving fluoride a clean bill of health, the NAS called on scientists to investigate if current fluoride exposures in the United States are contributing to chronic health problems like bone disorders, thyroid disease, low intelligence, dementia, and diabetes. particularly in people who are most vulnerable to fluoride's effects. These recommendations highlight that despite 60 years of fluoridation, many of the basic studies necessary for determining the program's safety have yet to be conducted. Fact number 4, fluoridation is not a natural process. Fluoridation advocates often claim that nature thought of fluoridation first. By this, advocates mean that fluoride can occur at naturally high levels in some water supplies. However, lots of toxic substances, like arsenic, and even some medicines, like lithium, can occur at naturally high levels. This doesn't mean that they're safe. Plus, the level of fluoride that is found in the vast majority of fresh surface water, like rivers and lakes, is far lower than the level of fluoride added in fluoridation programs. In the rare circumstance where a river or a pond has the same level of fluoride that is added to tap water, studies have found that salmon and frogs suffer serious harm, including bone disease, changes in behavior, and shorter lifespan. Also, the main fluoride chemical that is added to water is not what most people would call a naturally occurring compound. It is a corrosive acid captured in the air pollution control devices of the phosphate fertilizer industry. So why is fluoride captured in air pollution control devices? Because fluoride gases are hazardous air pollutants that, if released into the air, cause significant environmental harm. Now, just because fluoridation chemicals are derived from the toxic gases of the fertilizer industry doesn't necessarily mean that they're unsafe when diluted down into our tap water. Recent studies, however, suggest that these chemicals may present unique risks that are not found with natural fluorides. Fact number 5, 40% of American teenagers show visible signs of fluoride overexposure. According to a recent national survey by the Centers for Disease Control, about 40% of American teenagers now have a condition called dental fluorosis. Fluorosis is a defect of tooth enamel that is caused by fluoride's interference with tooth-forming cells. The condition shows as white spots and streaks, and in more severe cases, brown stains and tooth erosion. In the 1950s, health officials claimed that fluorosis would only affect about 10% of children in fluoridated areas and would be limited to its most mild forms. This, however, has proven false. Not only do 40% of American teenagers now have fluorosis, but in some fluoridated areas, the rate is as high as 70 to 80%, with some children suffering advanced forms of the condition. The high rate of fluorosis that we now see reflects the fact that children today are receiving fluoride from many sources besides tap water. When fluoridation first began, there was not a single tube of toothpaste that contained fluoride. Today, if you go to a grocery store, it can be difficult to find any toothpaste that doesn't contain fluoride. In addition to toothpaste, many processed beverages and foods made in fluoridated countries also contain elevated levels of fluoride. This is because when you add fluoride to water, you don't just add fluoride to the water itself, you add fluoride to all of the foods and beverages that are made with that water. And there are other sources of fluoride as well, including fluoride pesticides, tea, Teflon pans, and some fluorinated pharmaceuticals. The concern today, therefore, is not just about the safety of fluoridated water by itself, but the safety of fluoridated water in combination with all of the other sources to which we're now exposed. Fact number 6. For infants, fluoridated water provides no benefits, only risks. Up until the 1990s, health authorities advised parents to give fluoride to newborn babies. This is no longer the case. Today, the Institute of Medicine recommends that babies consume a minuscule 10 micrograms of fluoride per day. 10 micrograms of fluoride is roughly the equivalent of what babies ingest from breast milk. Breast milk contains virtually no fluoride. By contrast, infants who consume fluoridated water in baby formula consume up to 700 to 1,200 micrograms per day, which is about 100 times more fluoride than the Institute of Medicine now recommends. According to the CDC, these early spikes of fluoride exposure provide no known advantage to teeth. These spikes can, however, produce harm. For example, recent studies have found that babies who drink fluoridated water in their formula develop significantly higher rates of dental fluorosis in their permanent front teeth. Because of this, a number of prominent dental researchers now advise that parents should not add fluoridated water to baby formula. And teeth are not the only concern. In July of 2012, a team of Harvard scientists warned that the developing brain may be another target for fluoride toxicity. The Harvard team based this warning on a large number of studies from China that have found reduced IQ scores among children exposed to elevated levels of fluoride during the early years of life. 12 of the studies that the Harvard team reviewed found IQ loss at levels of fluoride exposure currently deemed safe in the United States. And one of the studies, which was sponsored by UNICEF, found IQ loss among nutritionally deprived children at the same level of fluoride that is added to water in fluoridation programs. Fact number 7, fluoride supplements have never been approved by the FDA. This pill that I'm holding here is called a fluoride supplement. It's designed to provide young children who live in non-fluoridated areas the same dose of fluoride that they would receive by drinking fluoridated water. This particular pill, which is to be chewed and swallowed once a day, contains 0.25 milligrams of fluoride. That's the same dose of fluoride that is found in about 1 glass of fluoridated water. But you can't just go into a grocery store and buy this pill. Instead, due to fluoride's toxicity, you need to have a doctor's prescription. Yet, although fluoride supplements have been prescribed for over 50 years, and although federal law requires that all prescription drugs be approved as safe and effective by the FDA has never approved fluoride supplements for the prevention of tooth decay. In fact, the only fluoride supplements that the FDA has ever reviewed have been rejected. So, with fluoridation, we are adding to the water a prescription strength dose of a drug that has never been approved by the FDA. Fact number 8, fluoride is the only medicine that is intentionally added to water. Fluoride is the only chemical that we add to water that doesn't actually treat the water. Chlorine, for example, is added to water to kill the bacteria, so that when we drink the water, we don't get sick. Fluoride, by contrast, is added to provide a medical treatment for a disease that is not caused by the water. Now, fluoridation proponents claim that fluoridation is not a medication, because in their view, it's no different than adding iodine to salt or vitamin D to milk. However, proponents fail to acknowledge that iodine and vitamin D are both essential nutrients, but fluoride is not. An essential nutrient is something the body has a physiological demand for. We need them. If we don't have enough iodine, for example, the thyroid gland will not function properly. Now, fluoridation advocates sometimes claim that fluoride is also a nutrient, but the National Academy of Sciences has repeatedly confirmed that this is not the case. Because fluoride is not a nutrient, the FDA has defined fluoride as a drug when used to prevent disease. Tooth decay is a disease. So when fluoride is added to a pill to prevent tooth decay, the FDA labels it a drug. And when fluoride is added to toothpaste to prevent tooth decay, the FDA again labels it a drug. So as a matter of logic, adding fluoride to water to prevent tooth decay is a form of medication. In fact, this is a key reason why many European nations rejected fluoridation, because in their view, the water supply is not an appropriate way to deliver a medicine. Because with all other medicines, it is the patient, not the doctor, that has the right to decide which medications to take. Fluoridation denies people this basic right. Fact number 9. Ingesting fluoride provides little benefit to teeth. When water fluoridation first began back in the 1940s, the medical profession believed that fluoride needed to be ingested to be most effective at preventing cavities. This was why fluoride was added to water and pills, because these are things that people swallow. Today, however, it is widely recognized that fluoride's main benefit does not actually come from ingestion. It comes from fluoride's topical contact with the teeth, a fact that even the Centers for Disease Control has now acknowledged. So with fluoridation, we are not only adding a medicine to water, we are adding a medicine that does not actually need to be swallowed. Fact number 10. Disadvantaged communities are the most disadvantaged by fluoride. For many people, the main selling point for water fluoridation is the idea that it can provide dental care to those who can't afford a dentist. In the United States, there is a serious shortage of dentists who will treat low-income patients. Up to 80% of dentists, for example, will not accept children on Medicaid. The notion, however, that we can compensate for this lack of care by forcing poor populations to consume fluoride chemicals is a dangerous one. Here's why. The dose of fluoride that can be safe for a healthy person can be harmful for a person in poor health. Children with nutrient deficiencies, for example, have been found to suffer significantly higher rates of dental fluorosis and greater damage to their brain from fluoride exposure than children with optimal nutrition. And in the 1970s, studies convincingly proved that dialysis patients were suffering incapacitating bone disease from the inclusion of fluoridated water in dialysis treatment. Although dialysis centers now filter the fluoride out, recent studies show that dialysis patients continue to accumulate high levels of fluoride in their bone, high enough to put them at risk for bone damage. So how does this relate to the question of whether fluoridation is good for low-income populations? It relates because kidney disease, poor nutrition, and other health problems are far more prevalent in poor populations than affluent ones. This may help explain why African American and Mexican American children suffer significantly higher rates of dental fluorosis. These disparities in fluoride risks have prompted several civil rights leaders, including the former mayor of Atlanta and the nation's largest Hispanic civil rights organization, to call for an end to fluoridation. And finally, claims that fluoridation can prevent the high rates of tooth decay now seen in poor areas do not withstand scrutiny. This picture shows an example of baby bottle tooth decay. This is the most devastating form of tooth decay seen in poor communities. Studies in the United States have repeatedly found that fluoridated water does not prevent this condition. But the big elephant in the room is this. The vast majority of poor urban areas have been fluoridated for over 30 years, and yet are still suffering from what many are calling a oral health crisis. In Cincinnati, the city's dental director described the state of oral health among poor children as absolutely heartbreaking and a travesty, noting that people would be shocked to learn how bad the problem has become. Cincinnati has been fluoridated since 1979. In Chicago, 64% of third graders have tooth decay. Chicago has been fluoridated since 1956. In Boston, black teeth rotted down to the roots have been described as a common occurrence in the city's poor neighborhoods, despite being, as one nurse put it, a sight we should never see in this country. Boston has been fluoridated since 1978. Poor populations need dental care, not cheap industrial chemicals in their water. The millions of dollars spent each year promoting fluoridation would be better spent advocating for policies that will provide real dental care, like allowing dental therapists to provide affordable care to populations who have no practical access to dentists.
Can I just get your recommendations for proper oral health care? What can people do to eliminate their, at least reduce their exposure to fluoride and still maintain proper oral health care?
Well, let me first point out the fact that fluoride does not reduce tooth decay. That is a myth. And that, yeah, if you brush your teeth really hard with it, you can show a little bit of a difference. But there are other things that work much, much better that never get a chance in the marketplace because we're stuck on this fluoride, basically myth. Iodine, much more effective. In my YouTube channel that I have a video called Bad Bugs, and we talk about gum disease. People talk about tooth decay. Tooth decay is a disease of children because of the malnourished children. Most people lose their teeth because of gum disease. And that's a chronic disease that you get when you're a child, and by the time you get to be 30, 40, 50 years old, your teeth get loose and start falling out, or being extracted, or you get your gums cut off and bone graft, and you spend lots of money. And basically it's an infection that you can hose away with a water pick and iodine and salt and soda or something in there and hose it away because they're swimmers. You can't brush them away. It's like trying to brush a fish away. If you took a brush and rubbed it around in the pond, is the fish going to leave? No, and looks at you like you're crazy. Well, the same thing's true of the bugs in your gums. They're swimmers. You can hose them away, and if you put something in the hose that they don't like iodine, you can hose them away and kill them while you're at it. And that's how you get to be oral health. I wrote a whole book on the subject. It's called How to Save Your Teeth with Toxic-Free Preventive Dentistry. And I've been making movies on it, a recipe for oral health. It's part of Bad Bugs. You can learn all this stuff just by Googling it and getting on my YouTube channel and watch it. Oral health is easy to create. It's just not treated right in this country. Dentists treat cavities with a drill. That's like using a knife to treat an infection. You got to keep cutting more and more off every time. Anybody's ever had one filling, had another one and another one and another one and another one, you say, well, if that solved the problem, how come we're doing this again and again and again and again? It doesn't solve the problem because tooth decay is caused by a bug called Streptococcus mutans. And if you really cared about children not having cavities, whenever they went to kindergarten or preschool, they'd have all the little kiddies spit in a tube and that incubate it, and if it turns purple, they've got Streptococcus mutans. When you do that, 1 out of 5 children will turn that tube purple. So then you take that kid, have the mother brush the teeth with iodine or one of the bug-killing agents, and then you have them spit in the tube again, and you look until that tube doesn't turn purple. You got rid of the bug that causes tooth decay. I had a guy in my practice, he never brushed his teeth. There was scum everywhere. And his teeth were perfectly healthy. He didn't have a cavity in his head. His gums were pink and wonderful. But when we looked under the microscope, he didn't have any crawlies. When he spit in a tube, it didn't turn purple. Believe me, it's an infection that goes from person to person to person. DNA testing shows it's coming from the mother or a grandmother or the caregiver to the child at about age 2. So it's a germ. It's transferred from the people that care for the child. All the germs in the baby's body come from mother. So, but if there happen to be a bad one in the mix, you can very simply get rid of it. You don't need it. It's not a valuable bug. Kill it. So it's gone.
What about fluoridated water then? If our community has it, how do we protect ourselves? Can filters take care of it? Do we have to resort to bottled, distilled water? What sort of options do people have?
The options are very few. The trouble is that fluoride, as I mentioned earlier, if you have it in your mouth, it goes up in your bloodstream. If you take a shower in fluoridated water, it goes up in your bloodstream. So if you have a community that is adding this terrible poison to the water supply, that you either have to abandon your community and go out to the country and find a house that's on a well, or move to another country like Mexico or Japan, or that doesn't put it in the water supply, Germany, France, Holland, one of the myriad of countries that don't allow it in the water supply. Or you can do what I'm telling people to do. Like me on Facebook, go to work and save your country. Because the problem is, industry is making billions of dollars off of this, and until enough of us stand up and say, stop it, they're going to keep doing it. It's making them money. So if we stand up and make them stop, they can find some other way to make money. Maybe do something valuable for our society rather than disposing of hazardous waste in our water supply. You got to work on it. It's democracy. There are more of us than there are of them. And so put your shoulder to the wheel and we will turn this around.
I know there's communities that do debate this to whether or not to fluoridate. Do we know what percentage of the United States is fluoridated?
It's over 75%, and
Okay.
it's all the big cities. California was one of the least fluoridated states up until 1995, and it was a market. Why was California least fluoridated? Because over 100 times the citizens of California have gone to the polls and said, not in my water. So Cargill and all the people that have the product to get rid of, American Dental Association, California Dental Association, went around Sacramento and passed out a few $100,000. They gave Pete Wilson $100,000 to sign the bill, governor. He comes from a city that has a law against it. That doesn't keep him from signing that. And so by buying legislatures at the state level, several states like Kentucky and California have mandatory fluoridation bill. Kentucky's had one of the oldest ones. You know what state in the union has the most number of people with the fewest number of teeth? That would be Kentucky. So the citizens have already spoken. They're buying billions and billions of dollars of bottled water a year, but you can't take a bath in it. What if you wanted to take a jacuzzi? What if you want to go swimming, work out at the gym? What if you're going to go in a sauna? You're going to get water, your body exposed to water some way or another. So we need to have water that's pure, and that's not what you get out of the tap. And that if they're trucking the stuff in from Florida or shipping it in from China, you definitely don't want to take a bath in it.
Caught in the crossfire. It's caught in the crossfire.